Hey guys, this is me, Chris. I'm going to be doing another video today. I realize it's been almost 4 years since I last did a video doing tutorials with C# and ASP.NET, but the last 4 years actually has been very busy for me. Pretty much had my first child 4 years ago and a beautiful baby boy. And as you can imagine, everybody who has children, it's just a little bit harder to do things such as this, putting videos together while they're growing up. And so I feel like I am able to do so a little bit more now. And without further ado, let's jump right in. So before I did C# and ASP.NET applications, but this tutorial I'm going to do is going to be a little bit different. It's still web-based. I'm going to be doing a web service call, but I will be doing it in Java. And the reason why I'm doing Java is nothing really too particular. I've just been more exposed to it over the last couple of years, and so I just feel a little bit more comfortable doing this demo with Java. So without further ado, I do have here Netbeans IDE 10, which is now controlled by Apache, but if you use Netbeans IDE versions before this, then you'll have no problems managing your way through this because it's pretty much the same. So what I'm going to do first is basically create a Java or a Maven web application because I'm again just a little bit more familiar with Maven than as I compared to before, I should say. So let's just kind of click next here. I'm going to just call this sample Maven web app. You can leave the rest be the default there. And then here you get to select the Java version that's going to run on and the server. And you can click add here and you can select the ones that have pretty much pre-installed with Netbeans IDE 10. I will be using Payara Server. One thing I should note, Payara Server wasn't included as the defaults, as part of the default options when I first downloaded Netbeans 10.0. I did have to go to tools and plugins. I can't click on it here because of this dialog here, but I did click on tools and plugins, and then from there you can actually search for and download and install Payara Server. And once you have that downloaded and installed, then you can reference that here in your Java IDE or Netbeans IDE and select that as a server to run your web service apps. So let me just click finish here. I'm going to let Netbeans do its thing. I'm going to create like a very simple web service call or web service class, which is just going to handle receiving an HTTP request, more specifically a post from a front-end application. Although for this demo here, I won't create that first front-end application. I will be using the PostMan app, which is a great third-party tool that is made for testing these kind of applications. So I'll show you how to use that with a couple of examples once this application is underway. So here what we're going to do is create a Java file here, and to make this handle HTTP requests, and actually before that let me actually create the file first. We're going to have to extend the class to extend from HTTP Servlet. Let me type it first correctly. So we're just going to click on this little bubble here, add the import, and then now we can go ahead and create the method that is going to receive the HTTP request. Okay, and let me just add these imports as well. Okay, without getting too far ahead of myself, whenever you create your front-end application or if you use Postman to test this back-end service, the request, the HTTP message sent into this web service is going to be represented by this request object, and then your application will do whatever it needs to do per that request, and then you will send your response back with this object over here. So what I'm going to do right now is just something very simple. And just not do any processing at all on the request object. I'm just going to simply say hello from the Java web service. And let's see what this is talking about. Okay. So this should be able to compile. So pretty simple right now. Okay. We're pretty much done with the Java portion of this. What we do need to do is actually define the web.xml, which is pretty much a config file that is used by Payara to associate a URL path to an actual Java class. So right now, when you first create a web application, there isn't any web.xml, so we're going to actually create that right now from scratch. And we do have to call it web. It's going to bring up this default just empty web class or web file. And just to save time, I did copy and paste from a sample file that I have, and this pretty much fits everything we need to associate a URL path to this Java file. So what you're going to do basically, or just to briefly go over this, we do have a web app brackets, pretty much the root brackets of this. And you'll have two different subsections in here. One defining the servlet, which basically has this first line item kind of define the servlet name. This can be anything, honestly, that doesn't matter. What does matter is that the servlet class is actually associated with. And here you're going to actually put the Java file. See, you have first servlet and its package path that is associated with it. So if you actually look here, this says com.mycompany.sample maven web app.first servlet. If you go to the Java file, that's exactly the package path that we have here. So you don't need to put the Java extension, just leave it like that. The second portion of this, you're going to have a servlet mapping. The servlet name has to match this. This tells the Payara server to associate the web URL path here to be associated to this Java file. And so basically the URL pattern here that you see for service call is going to be associated to this. So when another application makes a URL call to do an HTTP post, you have to define this extension to that URL for this to be routed to this servlet class. So I did get a little bit ahead of myself, and I'm gonna, just kind of do it over 1 second. But I did have this running briefly when it was offline, when I was offline. But what I'm gonna do now is just build the application again. It's gonna build and compile just fine. And when I run it, basically it's gonna start up the server that you had associated with this. And since I had this associated with Payara, it's going to come up on, it's going to launch the Payara server, which in turn is going to launch this web application. So let me go ahead and just run it. And if you look at the service tab here, I already had Payara installed, and the hourglass basically indicates that it's starting up. And you can look at this little console window over here and see that it's trying to start up. And during this time, near the very end, it's going to basically try to launch the web application that we just created, and it's going to read the web.xml, basically what we have defined over here, to associate the URL path to the application. So if we do a post, HTTP post from another source, and we have the correct base URL and this URL path at the end, then that request is going to make it to this servlet over here, which does practically nothing. it just responds back saying hello from the Java web service. Okay, so you can see here, you don't have to worry about this. When your web application gets deployed by the Payara server, it's basically going to bring a page that shows what the web application has as its default content in the index HTML, which basically just says hello world. And I think that's what we saw over here. So you don't have to worry about this for now. You can ignore it. So here's where we're going to test the actual HTTP request. If we go to this PostMan app that I was talking briefly about, you can paste the URL that you want to test connection with, and it's an HTTP post, so let's change this to a post. This won't actually call that service call because I didn't specify the URL path like the first service call. This will most likely just return the contents of the index HTML, and you can see here that's pretty much what it does. But to actually test the service call portion, you do have to specify, again, you have to tack on this extra URL to that path, and then it's actually going to reach the Java file that we created. Hello from the Java web service. You can see that's exactly what we have over here returned. So there's two ways to get to this, to exercise this through the Postman. I'm sure there's many ways, but I'm going to just kind of briefly discuss. One is basically copying what the URL is when the browser comes up. Just simply copy this and then tack on that second portion that contains the URL pattern. The other way is if you actually go and launch the admin console for the Payara server. I might have it open already, but let's just do it here. You click on Applications. This is the admin console for the Payara server. You can forget this test Maven web application. That was just something I was doing aside from this video. But you can see here the application that we just created got deployed here. If you click on Launch, you'll see this additional URL that you can actually reference. So if I copy that and bring that to the Postman app, it'll essentially do the same call. It'll go to the same source. Without the second part of the URL, it just returns that static content from the index HTML. If I do add the second part of the URL defined in the web.xml, you'll see the response back from the Java web service. So just this is a quick demo. I know this took a little while, but it's been a while since I did a video. Hopefully this is helpful to somebody, and I will continue doing more examples with Java. So thank you guys, appreciate it.